5 things changed the moment I stopped waiting for him to change. And I mean changed overnight. Not gradually, not over years. Overnight. I want to tell you about a woman named Evelyn. Evelyn spent 9 years in a marriage waiting for her husband to become the man she believed he could be. She was not waiting passively. She was not sitting in a corner hoping. She was actively, tirelessly, strategically waiting. She had conversations. She made requests. She gave ultimatums that she did not follow through on. She read books and handed them to him. She wrote letters. She planned trips to create new conditions. She waded through every version of almost and not quite and I'm trying and give me more time. And then one morning, for no particular reason she could identify, she just stopped. Not dramatically. She did not throw anything. She did not make a speech. She simply woke up, made her coffee, and thought, I am done waiting. And that was it. And within weeks, not years, not months, 5 things in her life changed so completely that she said to me later, it was like someone had been holding a door shut in my face and suddenly let go. Everything I had been pushing against just gave way. I am going to tell you what those 5 things were, because I think you might need to hear them today. My name is Patricia Hayes. Welcome to Patricia's Porch. The first thing that changed when Evelyn stopped waiting was this. She stopped being angry. Now, this might seem strange to you. You might think surely she became angrier when she finally accepted that he was not going to change. But that is not what happened. And it is not what happens to most women I know who finally stop waiting. Here is what I have come to understand about the anger that lives inside a relationship where you are waiting for someone to be different. That anger is not just frustration. It is not just disappointment. That anger has a very specific ingredient in it, and that ingredient is hope. When you are angry at someone for not changing, you are angry because you still believe they could. The anger is the feeling of seeing the gap between who they are and who you believe they are capable of being. And that gap is kept open by hope. As long as you hope they will change, the gap stays open. And as long as the gap stays open, the anger has somewhere to live. The moment Evelyn stopped waiting, the hope quietly dissolved. And when the hope dissolved, the anger had nowhere to live. And it left. She told me, I expected to be devastated. I expected to be furious. But what I felt was quiet, the kind of quiet I had not felt in years. Like a noise I had become so accustomed to that I stopped hearing it had finally stopped. I remember something very similar happening to me after I left my marriage. For a long time, I had carried a particular kind of rage, the rage of a woman who could see exactly what was being wasted. Not just her time, not just her energy, but the potential of the whole thing. The life they could have had together if only. If only he had done this differently. If only he had been more like. If only things had been different. And then one day, the if only fell away. And what was left was not devastation. It was relief. It was silence. It was the discovery that I had been so loud inside for so long that I had forgotten what my own quiet felt like. If you are carrying anger right now at someone who will not change, I want you to hear this, that anger is not a sign that you are still fighting for something. It is a sign that you are still waiting for something. And the moment you stop waiting, really stop, not just threaten to the anger will stop needing to exist. I know that might be hard to believe if you have been carrying it for a long time. Anger can feel like the only honest response to a situation that has not been fair to you. And you are right that it is honest. It is absolutely honest. It is the accurate emotional response to what has happened. But accurate and useful are two different things. And the anger that comes from waiting, the particular strain of it that lives in the gap between who someone is and who you need them to be, that anger does not protect you. It only keeps you tethered to the waiting. The second thing that changed was that Evelyn got her time back, not just her calendar time, not just the hours she had spent in conversations that went nowhere and arguments that resolved nothing. I mean her mental time, the invisible hours. Because here is something that no one talks about when they talk about difficult relationships. The relationship does not just take the time you give it directly. It takes the time you give it while you are supposed to be doing something else. It takes the first 20 minutes of your morning before you have even gotten out of bed, when your mind is already running through the same loop it has run 1,000 times before. It takes the hour at your desk at work when you are staring at a document, but you are actually somewhere else entirely. It takes the drive home, the shower, the last thing before sleep. It takes the capacity you have to be fully present with your children or your friends or your own life, because a portion of that capacity is always, always occupied. Evelyn told me that in the weeks after she stopped waiting, she would sit down to read a book and actually read it. She would have dinner with a friend and actually be there. She would go for a walk and notice what was around her instead of running the same internal argument on repeat. She said, I got back about 4 hours a day that I did not know I was spending. 4 hours a day. That is what the waiting had been costing her. Not in dramatic episodes of crying or fighting, just in the quiet, ongoing drain of mental space, given over to a problem that was not going to be solved. I want to ask you something. I want you to think honestly about how much of your mind is currently occupied by a person or a situation that is not changing. How much of your morning, your drive, your shower, your quiet moments, your falling asleep, how much of that belongs to the waiting? Because when you stop, you get it back, every single hour of it. The third thing that changed was that Evelyn started seeing herself clearly again. This one is harder to describe, but it may be the most important one. When you wait for someone to change, there is a very particular thing that happens to your self-image over time. Your sense of who you are begins to organize itself around the relationship, around what you are trying to do, around what is not yet working, around the version of your life that exists in the space between where you are and where you need to be. And gradually, without noticing, you start to see yourself through the lens of that gap. You start to define yourself by what you are waiting for. I am the woman who is trying to save this marriage. I am the woman who is working on this. I am the woman who is still holding on. I am the woman who has not yet gotten through to him. That is not who you are. That is the situation you are in. But when you have been in that situation long enough, the distinction blurs. You cannot easily see yourself outside of it. The week after Evelyn stopped waiting, she told me she sat in her kitchen and tried to answer a simple question. The question was, what do I like? Not what did I used to like? Not what did I like before all of this? What do I like now, today? And she said she sat there for almost 40 minutes and could not come up with a complete answer, because she had spent 9 years organizing her preferences, her time, and her identity around what the relationship needed. And she had let so much of herself go quiet that she was not sure anymore what was still there. I have heard this from so many women. The moment they stop waiting, they encounter a version of themselves they do not fully recognize. Not because they have disappeared, but because they have been so focused outward for so long that they forgot to stay acquainted with themselves. The good news, and this is genuinely good news, is that the self comes back very quickly once you stop looking away from it. What Evelyn found in the weeks and months after she stopped was that she was still herself. She still liked what she had always liked. She still had the same sense of humor, the same way of seeing things, the same instincts she had trusted before the waiting began. She had not lost herself. She had just loaned herself out for a very long time. And the moment she stopped waiting, she came back. I want to say something to you directly. If you have been in the waiting, if you have spent months or years trying to reach someone, trying to change the conditions, trying to create the right moment or the right conversation or the right version of events that finally produces the result you have been working toward, there is a very good chance that you do not fully know who you are right now outside of that effort. Not because you are broken, not because the waiting has destroyed you, but because any long effort shapes the person making it. And the effort of waiting for someone to change shapes you around the waiting. When it ends, there is a period, sometimes short, sometimes longer, where you have to relearn yourself. And that period is not a problem. It is the beginning of something real. The fourth thing that changed was that other people showed up differently. This is the one that surprised Evelyn most. She had not expected her relationships with other people to change when she stopped waiting for her husband to change, but they did significantly. What she noticed first was that she had more capacity for other people. The mental space that had been occupied by the waiting was suddenly available. She could show up at a dinner with a friend and actually be in the room. She could listen to what her sister was going through without her own internal noise drowning it out. She could be curious about other people again in the way she had been before the waiting had consumed her. And the second thing she noticed was that she started paying attention to how people made her feel in a way she had stopped doing. When you spend years managing your energy around one very specific emotional situation, you stop noticing the texture of other relationships. You stop noticing who leaves you feeling lighter and who leaves you feeling heavier. You stop tracking the small kindnesses, the thoughtfulness, the warmth that some people bring and others don't. When Evelyn stopped waiting, she looked up and saw all of it. She noticed that her oldest friend always made her feel seen. She noticed that her colleague always made time for her. She noticed that her neighbor had been quietly checking in on her for years without making a fuss of it. She said, "I had been standing with my back to a garden for 9 years, staring at a wall, and when I finally turned around, the garden was still there. It had not gone anywhere. I just had not been looking at it." I think many women who are deep in the waiting do not realize how much the waiting costs them in their other relationships. Not because they love those people less, but because the emotional bandwidth is simply not available. You cannot listen fully when a part of your listening is always somewhere else. The fifth thing that changed was the most surprising one of all, and it is the one Evelyn told me she had been most afraid of. When she stopped waiting, she found out who she actually was, not who she had been before the marriage, not who she was going to be now that it was over, who she was right now, in the quiet, without the project of the relationship to organize her life around. She had been afraid of this moment for years. It was one of the reasons she had kept waiting, because as long as she was waiting, as long as she still had the project, the work, the hope, she had a structure, she knew what she was doing. She knew what each day was for. The marriage, difficult as it was, had given her a framework for her life. And she had been afraid that without it, she would not know who to be. What she found was something different. She found that she had opinions she had stopped expressing. She found that she had preferences she had stopped honoring. She found that she was funnier than she remembered being, that she had more energy than she had experienced in years, that there were whole areas of her life, creative things, intellectual things, physical things, that she had slowly let go of in the effort to maintain the marriage, and that were waiting for her intact the moment she turned her attention back to them. She found, in short, that she was still herself, and that herself was considerably more interesting than the version she had been living with while she was waiting. I want to say something carefully here, because I do not want this to sound simpler than it is. Stopping waiting is not easy. It does not happen in a moment of resolution and then stay resolved. It is a practice. Some mornings you wake up and the hope is back, that quiet, persistent hope that says maybe this time, maybe now, maybe if. And you have to choose again to stop. But every time you choose it, it gets a little more real. And the 5 things I have described to you today, the quiet where the anger was, the hours returned to you, the clarity about who you are, the people in your life who have been there all along, and the self that has been waiting for you to come back to her, all of those things grow stronger with every day you choose to stop waiting. I know because it happened to me, and I know because I have watched it happen to women I love. Evelyn, today, is the most settled version of herself I have ever known. She does not have a perfect life. She has her difficulties, but she is in them as herself, clearly, without the distortion of waiting. And she says that is the difference between before and after that matters most to her. Not the absence of difficulty, but the clarity of who she is inside of it. I am Patricia Hayes. This is Patricia's Porch. I come here every week because I believe that these conversations matter. If something I said today found you at the right moment, please share it with someone else who might need to hear it. There is a subscribe button below because I make a new episode every single week, and I would love to keep being part of your life. Thank you for being here. I will see you next time.